As fantastic a CFP as Mello is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about the finances behind abortion or foster care. Now, to be fair, Roe versus Wade is a really hot topic right now. But in one of our January episodes, I specifically said that Zoe and I would be covering this topic later in the year. And little did we know that it would become so timely. So I guess we were ahead of the curve again, as always.
We just magic.
Zoe is always sending me articles after the fact of things that we've talked about. So again, so this is not us jumping on the bandwagon. This was something we were already planning on doing. But before we do that, I'm going to kick it over to Zoe because I don't really even understand what happened with the Supreme Court that's been causing all the hubbub. So I'll let our attorney take that away.
Okay, well, first thing to do is to just explain a bit about Roe versus Wade itself. It was the landmark 1973 decision that the Supreme Court made, in which they ruled it was a constitutional right for women to have the freedom to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. Jane Roe, because she sued under a fictitious name, was a pregnant single woman, and she filed a lawsuit against Harry Wade, who was the district attorney of Dallas County, Texas, where she lived, effectively challenging the Texas law, which only allowed abortions at the time with a doctor's order and only to save a woman's life. Now, the Supreme Court agreed that the law breached the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and as I said, made it a federal right to have an abortion under certain restrictions. Now, before this decision in the 50s and 60s, there were 200,000 to 1.2 million abortions performed that were unregulated and in illegal settings. And to give some context to that, in 1965, there were 200 deaths reported, but there were likely much more because this was an illegal act back then due to illegal abortions. In the early 60s in New York, 1 in 4 childbirth-related deaths in white women were due to abortion, whereas half of the childbirth-related deaths were due to abortions among non-white and Puerto Rican women. So the whole hoopla now is because there is a case between the Supreme Court, before the Supreme Court now, called Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. And on May the 2nd of this year, Politico obtained a February 2022 draft of the Supreme Court decision in that case, and that case gave the Supreme Court a chance to overturn Roe versus Wade. Now, the Dobbs case deals with the constitutionality of a 2018 Mississippi state law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks. Now, it's such a big deal because this is the first time ever that a draft opinion, so it's an opinion that hasn't been completed yet, the decision hasn't been made, but it's a first draft. It's the first time that a leak of a fully formed draft opinion has ever happened from the Supreme Court. So there was a lot of hubbub about who leaked it, what's going to happen to them. But honestly, that's really by the by. The draft revealed that the court intends to overturn Roe v. Wade completely. Now, this would abolish federal abortion rights, leaving it up to each state to decide. Now, the draft majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito was leaked, as I said, in an unprecedented way, and it will end the constitutional right to abortion. Now, the Supreme Court released a statement saying that the draft was genuine, but that it did not represent a decision or necessarily the opinions of the members. However, there's been another leak since then, just a couple of days ago, that the Washington Post reported on, which confirms that the 5-member majority to strike Roe remains intact. And that's according to 3 conservatives close to the court. So for all intents and purposes, this looks like this could be the decision. And the fact that that leak was from conservatives is a kind of about face from the conservatives who've all been claiming that the original leak was by liberals. So either way. Now, 16 states have already made abortions a fundamental right by state legislation and court opinions, regardless of the Supreme Court decision. So 16 states, abortion will still be safe. Those states are California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nevada, thank God, and New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. Okay, so it's at present, if this happened, abortion would still be legal in those states, 16 states. In 22 other states, abortions will either be tightly restricted or banned completely. And that's because some states have bans on abortion that predate Roe v. Wade, and they've been unenforceable for the past 50 years, but could be revived if Roe versus Wade is overturned. Other states have trigger laws, which would ban all or nearly all abortions if Roe versus Wade is overturned, either automatically or by state action, which could be done fairly quickly. And, you know, Mel's going to touch on this in more detail, but clearly it is a horrendous thought that whether you're entitled to an abortion or not depends on which state you're in. And it's thought that the states that are going to ban it completely will try and ban people from traveling out of state to get an abortion. So it's you can't just say, oh, well, you go to the 16 states where it's legal. First of all, they may try and ban that. And secondly, as Mel is going to touch on, many people who need or want an abortion don't have the funds to do that. And banning an abortion will lead to arguably illegal abortions or self-abortion. And self-abortion is only successful in 28% of the cases. And a recent study revealed it will increase the number of maternal deaths by 21% in total. And a third, which would be the national average would increase by 21% in this day and age. It's ridiculous. And a 33% increase in deaths related to birth among Black women. It's going to increase in economic hardship, the likelihood of women staying in abusive relationships. It's negatively going to affect the financial well-being and development of the children of these women. It's going to affect gender equality and diversity in the workplace, and really chaos, as the rights will vary state to state. And like I said, those banning it will likely try and make it illegal to cross state lines to have an abortion. The final decision in Dobbs is due in the summer of 2022. So that's just a rough kind of outline of where we're at and why.
So I guess I know that laws get put into place and then they get overturned all the time, but I guess if there was already a law that was in place, why would it be challenged again if there was no new information?
Because this is based on case law. Case law runs alongside statutes, and this is the Supreme Court of this land considering that law, considering the case law, and effectively saying it's not good law. Mm-hmm. That's we're overturning that decision, which was the crucial decision which allowed women the right to have an abortion. They're saying no. So now federally, it's no longer a right. It's now up to each state.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the states, because I'm going to give a little bit more detailed list that Zoe was talking about. So before I get into all of my facts and numbers, obviously, you guys, this is a hot button case. And, Zoe and I have expressed how we stand on this issue multiple times on the show. And I don't want to get into an argument about if you think it is or isn't a child at whatever point. I want to simply try as much as possible to talk about the finances. But of course, this is a very big, super sensitive issue that splits up a lot of groups of people, whether it's Democrats and Republicans, whether it's males and females, whether it's religious people versus atheists. I mean, this is a big fucking deal. People who believe that states should have sovereign rights, and then people that believe that the Fed should, be the do all say all. I mean, this is a big fucking deal in the United States. So for our global listeners, I'm not really sure what your stance is on abortion in the country that you're in, but for America, this has been something that has been going on for a hot minute. So the fact that all of a sudden this has even come out, there's a lot of women who are completely thrown off guard that this is even, getting kicked around. So before I get into that, what are your thoughts on the protests at the Supreme Court justices' houses?
Oh, I hadn't actually heard that. I knew that there were protests outside the Supreme Court and in Washington and whatever, but I hadn't heard that there were protests outside the actual justices.
Yeah, actually outside there. And for me, I think that's too much. Like, yes, protest, yes, do everything. Going to somebody's house, that is a little threatening to me. I don't care what it's about. I don't care if it's about abortion. I don't care if it's about vaccinations. Like, when you go to somebody's personal property and, you're protesting, I personally think that's a little bit out of pocket. And I don't agree with that personally.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really for it either, but it's such a fucking massively important topic. And I think most women, once again, first of all, are thinking, why the fuck are we having to even discuss this again? And secondly, it's a big fat group of white men on the whole that are deciding it. So, how is that right? So I can see how women are, all people, not just women, men too, are passionate about it. But yeah, I mean, I would think that their protest would be better placed somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. And for you guys who know that we put all of the resources that we found, I want to draw your attention to the very last resource that is on the list. And this is an article from The Atlantic that Zoe found very interesting. And it's from a very legal perspective in regards to the 14th Amendment that she had spoken about. And I would highly encourage you guys to read it, because it puts a completely different spin on what we're talking about here. And, and for the guys out there, whether you believe in a woman's right to choose or not, I guess I have to try to explain to you, when you're a woman and you have a man telling you what to do with your body, it's taken really hard. It's like, we don't go and tell guys to get, vasectomies, or tell guys you can't have kids until you're, 24, whatever. Like, we don't do that. And it does make it a little bit harder to digest when the people who are deciding potentially your fate, your future, and your finances future are not of your gender and don't have the ability to even carry or make that decision. And it's really hard to be comfortable with that. So let's talk about some numbers real quick. So it is estimated that currently, to raise a child to the age of 18 in 2022, it will cost an estimated $272,049. Now, this does not include college for the child. It also does not include if the child has mental disabilities or has physical disorders of any kind. And so we're looking at approximately $1,259.48 a month to raise a child.
My boys spend that on blooming DoorDash alone. So I'm gonna hasten to say that it probably costs a way fucking shit ton more in real life, but okay.
Yeah. So no, absolutely. And that doesn't include a lot of things. But the national average, $1,259.48. If you're Zoe's kids, probably like $2,500 a month, right?
Each.
Yeah. So, and of course they're eating like horses, because they're young they're young adult men who have a high metabolism still. I mean, good on them, but whatever. And so now Zoe had mentioned that there were trigger states that have things that are in place that, if in the event that Roe versus Wade is overturned, they have laws on the books right now that will immediately trigger and start banning abortions in some in some way. So those states are Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Missouri. I always say Missouri. I don't know why. I'm sorry if you're from Missouri.
Misery.
Not Missouri. Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Now, the states that I'm about to list have abortion bans. Basically, after 6 to 8 weeks, they will not offer an abortion. And I know that you would think, well, yeah, that seems like a long time, a month and a half, 2 months. That sounds like a long time, but most women don't even know they're pregnant until the 6th or 7th week.
And actually, I think it's even more than that. In the reality is it's more like the 10 to 12 week stage.
Yeah. And I mean, unless they're getting, ravenously sick or they're just that on top of their period, guys, this might be a hard episode for you guys, but for women are not always regular. It's not like we bleed, like we check our clock and we start bleeding. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes your period's late for no reason when you haven't even had sex. And then sometimes it's fucking early. And sometimes it's 3 times in 3 weeks. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? So it's not that regular that women can always be aware of exactly when their period is coming.
And it can be affected by stress and all other illness and all other things. So it's unless you're on a pill and you know exactly when your period is going to be, and even then it can be fucked up. But
absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing with the pill is that you're supposed to take it at the same time every day. I can't even fucking take vitamins every day. When I was given the pill, I was like, okay, I got to take this every day. All right, that's going to be hard enough. What, at the same time every day? Are you fucking kidding me right now? So,
and then if you're sick or have diarrhea, then that can affect the pill even working. So even if you take it at the right time every day, there are other things that can make it not as effective. So we're just saying it's very hard.
And once you're over, for gentlemen, once you're over 35, you can't really take the pill anymore. You're not recommended to take it, and or if you smoke. So a lot of times when we're talking about reproductive health issues, it's like, oh, well, why doesn't she just get on the pill? And of course, my argument is like, well, why doesn't he wrap it up? Because 2 people make a baby, but we're not going to go down that road. But the point that I'm making is that it's not like you just can stay on the pill until you finally go into full blown menopause. And even then, you guys, when you go into menopause, it takes a minute. It's not like your body just goes, I'm in menopause, and then there's no potential to make babies again. It doesn't work like that. So there's a whole bunch of shit. So these states have things on the books that are banning abortions after 6 to 8 weeks. And if Roe is overturned, then these are going to go in full effect as well as some other limitations. So we're talking about Alabama, Georgia, Iowa, Ohio, and South Carolina. And then these other 4 states, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Arizona, and Michigan, have had abortion bans in place since 1973. And Zoe referred to this, that have never been removed. So the minute that Roe versus Wade, if it does get overturned, these laws are going to be reenacted by not doing anything, because they're going to be enforceable. So they're going to become active again, and it's going to be up to them. Now, Oklahoma signed a bill into law this April.
Oh dear. Yeah. You're shaking your head. It's going to be bad.
If I'm stopping, that means some shit, you guys. So Oklahoma signed a bill into law in April that completely bans abortion, except when the procedure is performed to save the life of the mother. And it is scheduled to take effect this summer, which means that it doesn't matter if she's raped. It doesn't matter if it's incest. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Basically, if it's not going to threaten the mother's life, then therefore there will be no abortion. And that is in the state of Oklahoma and Louisiana. They are moving forward this month with a bill that classifies abortion as homicide.
Oh my God, are you fucking kidding me?
Wait, it gets better. And it would mean, so classifying an abortion as homicide, the state of Louisiana is basically saying that a patient or the provider that ends a pregnancy will be criminally charged with homicide. And at this time, it is unclear if they will be able to reach across state lines as they would in a normal homicide case. So if, somebody gets killed in California and they flee to Nevada, California and Nevada can work together. And so Louisiana, it is unclear at this time if somebody does go to one of the states where abortion will continue to be legal or is planned to continue to be legal, will they be able to cross state lines to get it? Now, Connecticut signed into law just within this year that they would not extradite abortion providers to other states such as Louisiana. So literally what we see, it's always been the federal government against the states, right? The states want their sovereign rights. The federal government wants to govern the way that they want to govern it. Well, now what we're seeing is infighting between different states who have different perspectives or whose populations have different perspectives on having abortions or terminating a pregnancy.
Can I just say that basically we're going back 50 years. We're backtracking 50 years and then some. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Again, for those of you who are in this country, you understand the conversation between Zoe and I. You might not agree with it, and I respect that, but you understand the conversation. For global listeners, this might be really odd to you. But again, this is a huge deal. This is probably one of the biggest issues that we've ever addressed on this show, as far as the emotions involved and just the heated debates that have been going on, that will continue to go on even if Roe is not overturned. And there's a variety of reasons of that. All of them we cannot cover on this show, but you guys, we have so many resources on this one. It is fucking ridiculous. To be honest with you, I don't know if I will have enough text space. When you put a description on for an episode, there's only a certain amount of characters you're given. I don't know if I'm going to have enough character space to list all of our resources, but we literally have, between Zoe and I, about 40 different articles that her and I have researched, that her and I have done and pulled together in order to make this episode for you. So let's talk about the average child support payments. So child support can vary and does vary state to state. So we see Massachusetts, who averages about $1,187 per month per child, where if you just go a short drive away to Virginia, they are actually one of the lowest for child support payments at around $402. So when we're looking at a national average on child support, we have states that are very, very low. We have states that are very, very high, including Hawaii and Washington State. And so with that, we come out with an average that the average monthly child support payment is approximately $721 per month. Now, remember what I said, that to raise a child to adulthood, it was $1,259, and the average child support payment is $721. Some is over, some is less.
Plus they have to pay it.
Well, yes. And that's one of the things, right? Is that, that is a reason why we might break this topic down into little subtopics, because this touches on a lot of feathering through government, and it touches on a lot of systems that are broken. And if you're pro-adoption, great. The adoption system is fucked up too. The foster system is fucked up. Like this one issue touches on so many different things that it is almost like a domino effect. Now, the thing is that with this $1,259 national average a month that it costs to raise a child, what is not included in that is time. And what I mean by that is, we talked about how women, and specifically when they are the primary caregivers of the children, they are usually the ones that are running them around to practices and doing things like that. Well, that takes them out of the workforce. And the time that they're pregnant for prenatal care and all of this other type of stuff where they're going to the doctors, that also takes them out of the workforce. And here in the United States, the primary responsibility and time of all doing that stuff falls on the woman, which takes a woman out of the workforce before she even actually has the child. And this is just for people who can afford the child, who plan on the child. The woman is naturally, because it is our physiology that has the baby. And so we lose time in the workforce, which means that other counterparts, whether they be other women who are not pregnant or other males who are obviously not pregnant, who are working, it takes the woman out of the workforce, which then makes it a little bit less probable, or it makes it harder for them to get promotions or maybe pick up overtime that would help them make ends meet, which we're going to see here in a minute. And that is not even talking about pregnancy discrimination, which is illegal. We know that. However, one of the resource links that I put in there, there is a study by Natalie Kurthoff and Jessica Silver Greenberg, who wrote a investigation piece for New York Times. And the link is in there for you guys to look at it, where they actually went in and they investigated all of these companies, big companies that you would know, who very specifically targeted, I don't want to say very specifically targeted, but who sidelined pregnant women and discriminated against them. So when we're talking about numbers, as we've been talking about the show this entire time, we're not just talking about this fucker's not paying child support, or this fucker's not paying enough child support, or whatever the case is. We're talking about everything that goes along with the decision to have a child. Okay. So it's not about terminating a pregnancy. It is about everything from that point forward with whatever decision you make. And that one decision can split you off financially into a myriad of long, impactful waves that ripple out for years and years and years. When we have women that are pregnant, they come out of the workforce. And then if they are considered the primary caregiver, if the man or the significant other continues to work, based on a US Census study from 2018, and I know that statistic seems a little old, but you guys have to understand that if you look through all the resources, some of the resources I didn't even use because I'm like, fuck, that statistic is way too fucking old. But there is not a lot of good data where you can pull from. But now everybody is scrambling to find data because people are trying to put numbers behind this decision if it does in fact get overturned. So based on a US Census study from 2018, 65% of the time, the mothers retain the custodial rights. So this disproportionately affects the mother. So if Roe is overturned, then the average American would have to travel about 125 miles to reach the nearest clinic that offers them an abortion. And currently right now, the estimated mileage away from finding a location where a woman can get a legal, safe abortion is about 25 miles. And the reason why that is relevant is because, as Zoe touched on, for lower income women and predominantly a lot of women of color, this is harder for them because typically they're in jobs that will not give them paid time off in order to drive and get this procedure done. And they're not in a situation where they have access to transportation that can just drive them for 125 miles, hang out while they get the procedure and drive 125 miles back, nor do they have the money to secure a taxi or Uber to do it. And we will talk about Lyft and Uber here in a minute. And this shit is fucking crazy, you guys. So the Hyde Agreement is just a legislative provision that currently is barring the use of federal funds to pay for abortion, except to save the life of the woman or if the pregnancy arises from incest or rape. And that would be a whole nother topic. There's ins and outs of that, but I want, sometimes you hear talking points where people are acting like, federal funds are just passing out abortions left and right. And so I wanted you guys to be aware that that is not the case. In the US, we don't have a specific socialized medicine in the concept that a lot of other countries, developed countries do. So in the United States, the average cost of a vaginal birth is $13,024. And I have friends who have given birth and it was way fucking more than that. So I don't know, again, I don't know where this number specifically came from. When you take, the states that are very low, then you take the higher end states and you kind of mesh that together. Now, if you have a cesarean, the cost rises to $22,646. There are companies who are already putting in place and reacting to the leak of the potential overturn of Roe versus Wade. Amazon has announced that it would reimburse their employees who had to travel over 100 miles to seek medical treatment for reproductive health issues. Yelp, Apple, and Citigroup have announced that they would begin covering travel expenses for employees traveling out of state seeking reproductive care. Companies stationed out of Texas, who recently just passed a 6-week abortion law that we talked about here a moment ago, including Bumble, OJO Labs, and Glossier, spoke out against the new law and implemented policies designed to help employees affected by it. We're going to come back to Bumble here in a second. Now, I didn't even know this was the thing, and I'm fucking blown away by this. Lyft and Uber have committed to cover drivers' legal fees in the case of a lawsuit, because after the Texas law, they are trying to go after drivers who provide women rides to abortion clinics.
Oh, it's so fucking ridiculous.
Which is fucking crazy. So what you have is you have a far overreaching of the states. We have states wanting to cross other state lines to do things around this topic. And then you have Lyft and Uber gig drivers being threatened that they are going to be sued. And so the thing is that if, let's just, devil's advocate, if Louisiana's law does get passed and it does make having an abortion a homicide, and you get in an Uber, even if you're close to the state line, and the Uber driver drives you over to another state to get a legal abortion in that state, does that make that driver an accessory to a murder? Because based on a homicide, it would. And so Lyft and Uber has had to step up and say, hey, drivers, chill out. We'll protect you if you get sued for driving somebody to an abortion clinic. Now, I can't imagine you having to play moral judge, God, and jury if some lady gets in your car and says, hey, I want to go to XYZ address. And I mean, I don't even understand how they could put that on a Lyft or Uber driver. And that fucking blew me away. That's a whole nother conversation that we are not going to get in here, but that shit is fucking crazy. So Salesforce promised to help employees in Texas relocate to another state if they were concerned about the ability to find reproductive care. And Bumble, again, and Match also set up special funds to support employees affected by the ban. So we have companies that are coming out. They are, mostly in our liberal tech sector, where they are coming out with the surprise of Citigroup, actually, because usually the banking sector is pretty conservative. So the fact that Citigroup came out and said, hey, we're going to help our employees if they choose to do this, that's kind of a big deal. But if you're pissed off about that, then remember that Hobby Lobby, because of religious beliefs, didn't want to pay for contraceptives. So if you're going to be okay with that, then don't tell me a fucking thing about the other companies supporting their employees in whichever way that they choose. You can't have it both ways. When we're talking about who the abortion restrictions affect in the event that Roe is in fact overturned, we're looking at disproportionately Black and Hispanic women are affected because they do not have access to abortions. And that is because, again, everything we talked about before, the 100-mile driving, not having reliable transportation, the fact that they might have to go out of state, and the fact that they do not have a job that will allow them paid time off in order to do that. Now, when we talked about a $15 an hour episode, there was a lot of people that were pissed off because they thought low-income people should not get paid $15 an hour. But remember, the reason why they had targeted $15 an hour is because that would bring most of the people up to, slightly above the poverty line. So if you're going to be pro-life or against abortion, however you want to phrase it, doesn't matter to me, but then you're also against a $15 minimum wage, then you're saddling a woman with a financial responsibility that could affect them. And we know that the access to not be able to terminate a pregnancy, if the woman so chooses, has financial ramifications. And when we talk about that $1,259 a month, that's per child. So if you're working a job that is less than $15 an hour with multiple kids, or even one kid, if you're a solo parent, do the math, you guys. That's not something that is just very easily done. And so we see that Black and Hispanic women are more likely to seek abortion resources, and that they typically are the ones who live in states where abortions will be illegal. So they get hit economically on both sides. Now, Jason Lindo, a professor of economics at Texas A&M University in College Station, is quoted as saying, quote, "The evidence is very clear that this is going to lead to negative outcomes on things like women's education attainment, women's labor force participation, and measures of economic success." And we've touched on that a little bit with just the physiology of the woman's body and the time that it takes her to get the care necessary, even if she is financially, emotionally, and ready at a time in her life where, having a child makes sense for her. Now, we spoke about the long reaching effect of financial decisions when we talked about the economics of discrimination episode. And in the economics of discrimination episode, we talked about redlining. And for those of you who are not familiar with that term or haven't listened to that series, first of all, go back and listen to it. It's fucking amazing. But what redlining is where they would specifically not lend to neighborhoods that were persons of color. And by doing that, what happened is they robbed generations and generations and generations of people out of the ability to have home ownership. And the reason why that's a big deal is because you need to understand in financial planning that most people, unless you're part of the 1%, your home is always your biggest asset. And when you take from somebody the ability to purchase a home, you are in effect stunting the financial vitality of that person through many, many, many generations. So when we're talking about economics of discrimination and redlining, we're talking about parallels drawn to women who might be in a financial situation where they are food insecure already, or they are insecure of their basic needs, making a very tough decision on if they're going to terminate a pregnancy and being forced to actually have the child, thus saddling them with a responsibility. And I'm not saying they're not going to love the child, but what I'm saying is that you're saddling them with a responsibility that will affect them through many generations. And we're going to get into some statistics here in a little bit, what happens to kids when we're talking statistically in foster care. But when we're also talking about that, what we're talking about is your bottom line. We're talking about them leaning more on state and federal social safety net programs. We're talking about them predominantly not having an insurance, because if you're not even getting $15 an hour, the chances of your employer giving you health insurance is probably slim to none, which means that if something really bad happens, or even just if you have a really bad ear infection, they're going to end up in the ER. And the thing is that when they get saddled with a child that they are not prepared for at the time, all of these things start compounding. And we see this ripple effect that moves through generations, and that also can move through an epicenter of a locality, whether it's a county specific or whether it's a state specific. So there is long reaching ramifications that extend. And a lot of times what we see is that the women who are seeking abortion are currently living paycheck to paycheck, and they either can't afford a child or they cannot afford or any more children. Women represent 57% of the workforce, and young women represent more than 57% of college graduates, according to Ann Clark Wolf, and she is the founder of investment bank Independence Point Advisors. If Roe versus Wade does end up getting overturned, we are seeing that travel costs for women will be expected to rise and have been currently rising to about 30%, because they need to venture farther and farther out to get a legal, safe abortion. In the meantime, the women who are forced to go through the unwanted pregnancies can result in a lifetime of poverty. And we see that approximately half of the women seeking to end their pregnancy are already living below the poverty line. And we see that women who do not have the option to have a legal abortion, within 5 years, they are 4 times more likely to live below the federal poverty line continuing than those who receive the procedure. So not only are they already below the poverty line when they get pregnant, if they are refused a legal, safe abortion, then what ends up happening to them is that they are 4 times more likely to still be below the poverty line line 5 years later. A decade later, these same women who were denied the right to end their pregnancy had higher bankruptcies, evictions, and lower credit scores. And again, think of the Economics of Discrimination series. So all of this stuff comes around and can and will affect your bottom line on one way or another. And all of this information is based on a research paper by Sarah Miller that came out of the University of Michigan that was released January of this year. So these are up-to-date numbers. Now, some who oppose abortion will say that if abortion remained legal, that it could result in smaller population and a smaller labor pool that would end up hurting GDP and thus hurting the economy. The fallacy behind that argument is the assumption that women are going to have an abortion and then never have kids. But what we find is that women, typically most women who have an abortion, either already have kids or plan on having kids and do go on to have kids when they are more financially ready at a better, more secure, stable time in their life. And around 140,000 children are adopted by American families each year. 62% of the children were placed in their adopted families within a month of birth. So think about, kittens and puppies tend to get homes a lot quicker than senior dogs, or a lot quicker than, dogs or cats that are maybe a couple years old. Well, the same we see coming through the adoption system. And on any given day, and this is where the statistics get blurry and I have a lot of conflicting information. So on any given day, there are nearly anywhere from 400,000 to 428,000 children currently in the foster care system. And the data is all over the place. Now, I think that since there is a concern of Roe versus Wade being overturned, that we will see a lot of more up-to-date data being released as this becomes more to the forefront. In 2020, about 117,470 children in the United States were still waiting to be adopted. Now, more than, again, this is where the statistics get blurred, more than 20,000 to 23,000 children will end up aging out of the foster care system every year because they never actually get adopted, whether that's because they came into the foster system too old or for whatever various reasons, they will actually age out with just bouncing from foster home to foster home and never actually get picked up for adoption. After reaching the age of 18, 20% of the children who are in foster care will become instantly homeless. 1 out of every 2 foster kids who age out of the system will have some form of gainful employment by the age of 24. There is less than a 3% chance for children who have aged out of foster care to earn a college degree at any point during their life. 7 out of 10 girls who age out of the foster care system will become pregnant before they are at the age of 21. The percentage of children who age out of the foster care system and still suffer from direct effects of PTSD is 25%. The number of foster kids who are eligible for adoption on average every year is about 101,666 kids. Now, those are foster kids up for adoption. And then there's adoption kids. So there are 2 different numbers we're talking about here. 32% of children who are eligible for adoption from foster care must wait a typical amount of 3 years before they are finally adopted. About 1 in 4 kids who age out of the system will not graduate from high school or not obtain their GED. However, we see that the children in foster care are very resilient, and 70% of the foster kids still say that they really do hope that they will attend college one day. The majority of women who age out of the system, and again, these numbers are all over the place, anywhere from 65 to 80% need government benefits. And out of the men who age out of the foster care system, anywhere between 28 to 38% of men need to receive government assistance of some type. The age of the child when they enter the foster care, as I mentioned before, has a direct correlation to the likelihood of them being adopted versus legally emancipated out of the system. The United States ranks 55th in the world when it comes to the safe delivery of a child. Adoption is, of course, a viable option. But the thing that we have to take into consideration is that the mother still needs to carry the baby to term, which could cause potential health threats to the mother. We also see that women who are denied an abortion typically choose to parent anyway, rather than get up for adoption. So if you are a pro-lifer, then you would be like, great, see, they wanted the kid all along. Well, what we're not looking at is that their situation hasn't changed. It's not that the woman is a child hater. It's just that it's not the time. So if she is forced to have the baby and does not choose to give it up for adoption, her financial situation has not changed. Now, let's flip this around for a second. Okay, because we've talked about federal and state governments making it so that women do not have control over their own bodies. Now, I'm only speaking for myself. Okay. just 10 months ago, we had people protesting and pissed off because they did not want the federal government coming in and telling them that they had to be vaccinated. And I will tell you that I do not believe in mandatory vaccinations. I believe that everybody has the right to choose if they want to be vaccinated. But I will argue with you on the point that you choosing not to get vaccinated against a communicable disease that could affect me, make me very sick, affect my bottom line, my health, and the health of my family, impacts me more than me choosing to have an abortion impacts you. And this is where the crux of this whole thing comes in, where we see that some people are saying, you can't make me get vaccinated, but then those same people will turn around and try to tell a woman what she can and she cannot do. I am a believer. Zoe is an atheist. We've said that many times on this show. And a lot of the people who are typically against abortion their fundamental argument is based in the belief of religious beliefs. And we have talked about nonprofits on this show. We have talked about one of the reasons why nonprofits are allowed to have the tax-free status that they do is because if they were taxed, then it would allow the federal government, whoever's in power, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, to come in and could potentially discriminate against a religious freedom, whether it's a Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever, discriminate against them by using the tax code as a weapon. And so this is the reason why that regardless of your religious preference in this country, typically that is going to fall under a nonprofit status in the United States. Well, when we have people who are religiously zealous and they are against abortion based on their religious beliefs, we find that that is a direct impediment on other people's religious freedom. So Zoe has just as much of a right to say she doesn't believe in God as I have a right to say that I do believe in God. But the minute that I or anyone under whatever religious confinement it be, that I tell Zoe, hey, my God says that this is murder, therefore you can't do it. We have to acknowledge that that is a direct attack on her religious freedoms and or her right to not have a religion of any choice. And as Zoe referred to, we'll find out what their decision is ultimately in summertime. Do you got anything to add to that, Zoe?
Just a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I see it the same way as prostitution. I mean, that wait, hear me out. In that there is always going to be abortions. There's always going to be prostitution. So why not be fucking grown up about it and make it safe, legal, and all the rest of it within parameters, kind of thing. But by making it illegal, you're not going to stop abortions. If that's what your fucking goal is, it's not going to happen. It just means that more women are going to die having illegal abortions or self-abortions or whatever, or through childbirth even. So, it's just, for fuck's sake, it just makes me, I can hardly believe that we're having the discussion and going and rewinding 50 years. It just makes me flabbergasted, which is a great word. And my only other thing was, if you didn't see it on Saturday, you have to see Saturday Night Live's opening skit with Benedict Cumberbatch, all about this very issue. It is.
Oh, I'm gonna have to watch it.
It's fucking hilarious. I thought I sent it to you. If I didn't, then I will. But
we'll watch it together when we're done.
Yes, we should, because it's so on point about, the justice bringing up common law from England in 1300s and stuff like that. Dude, we're in 2022. It just makes me very, very sad that we're even having this discussion.
If you guys have feedback for us, you can hit me up at mel@financestheotherfword.com. You can follow me on FTOFW_podcast on TikTok. You can follow us on Instagram at financestheotherfword. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, even though we don't do very much with Twitter. And of course, you can follow us on our YouTube channel. And you can follow Lily Lou Mittens on Instagram. We appreciate you guys staying on with us. And for those of you who do not like the idea of abortion or maybe flat out against abortion, if you've made it this far, thank you for having the fortitude to stick it out and being open-minded enough to actually listen to a different opinion. Whether you still agree with it or not, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just appreciative that you guys are hanging out. And with that, we are out this bitch.
Cheerio.
Thanks for listening. If you like us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.